We're going to start things off a little differently today. And I must admit, the title of the video is a bit of a poke at some of those ridiculous LinkedIn posts that you see. Here's me on the beach in St. Lucia, and here's what it taught me about fractional leadership. Or, I've just asked my girlfriend to marry me. Here's the parallels with supply chain efficiency. I mean, come on. If my posts ever resort to that, unfollow, and rightly so. Anyway, genuine story. A couple of weeks ago, I went to the doctor without wanting to pull back the curtain too much. I've been on the loo more than normal for a short while and didn't know what was going on. So the doctor ran some tests and said, right, here's what's going on. You've got some stomach condition. I forget the name. That's me saying that, by the way, not the doctor. Take these tablets, they'll stop the vomiting. But actually, this is going to need some dietary changes. You probably need to get on the treadmill a bit more and maybe some longer term medication. We'll sort that out, but naturally, it's going to take a bit of time. And I'm sitting there thinking, this would have served as a perfect analogy when discussing problem management with the customer the other week. Yeah, I know. So, in short, I was talking to a customer in relation to how they manage and measure problems in their ITSM platform. And it was mentioned that there's a need that when the problem is resolved, they need to go back to any customers whose tickets were linked to the problem and closed pending the problem being resolved. Whoa, 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 whoa. What do we mean closing incidents because they're simply linked to a problem? Well, here's how my doctor's appointments suddenly become relevant. Me throwing up every couple of hours, I think that's our incident, or to be more precise, incidents. Like many of you, I expect to be able to go through the day without chucking my guts up. That is, by a literal definition, an unplanned interruption to my day. And the incident is the reason I've gone to see the doctor in the first place. Now, the doctor has done some tests as to why I keep throwing up, root cause analysis, and has found a cause, the said condition. He's proposing to provide me with some tablets to stop the vomiting, but that's not going to address the underlying issue. Okay, so we have a workaround, great. And the doctor's suggestion of dietary changes and potentially longer term medication, that's our candidate fix, but we've yet to implement it. So at this juncture, I'd say we're typically at the known error phase. We know what the issue is, we have a way to remediate it, i.e., we can stop the incidents, but the problem's not gone away. But here's the important bit. It's only at this stage where we can appropriately start resolving, closing off incidents associated to the problem. The problem process thus far has achieved two things. It's found our root cause, but most importantly, related to the incidents, we've got a workaround that should prevent those from reoccurring. And as I said, the problem hasn't gone away. There's still more to do. Now, my doctor didn't discharge me when he realised I'd got a stomach condition. He had to do something to tackle the incident. And likewise, he didn't discharge me a week later when the vomiting had stopped. He was clear the incident's under control, but the underlying issue isn't resolved. There's a plan, there's follow up, and I need to know what's happening next. Like the example I shared here, I think this is what IT teams typically do. And I'll stick to my analogy terms rather than IT to highlight how sometimes crazy this is. You might have a situation, hi doctor, I keep throwing up. Ah, yes, there appears to be a stomach bug going around, but we don't know what that is specifically, and there's no recommended treatment. But when we find out, we'll let you know. Thanks for visiting. Yeah, but doctor, I keep throwing up several times a day. Well, yes, but as soon as we know any more, we'll keep you posted. This is very, very, well, not very close. This is the equivalent of kicking your user's incident into the long grass, closing off an incident ticket and associating it to an ongoing problem with no root cause, no workaround, no anything. Or just as dangerously, we might get, hi doctor, I keep throwing up. Well, take 2 of these daily. If you feel sick, take another one. That should help. Yeah, but doctor, I don't think it's normal for me to keep feeling sick. Well, no, it's not, but just take the tablets. I'm sure you'll be fine. In this scenario, we're dealing with the incident, great, but we've gone too far the other way. We're seemingly not making any effort to understand why or what the root cause might be. Now, we just wouldn't accept either of these situations in our personal lives. So why do our users, when it comes to the technology services that they consume? Well, again, the reality is they don't. Where we behave somewhat like the incompetent doctor, we get repeat incidents, repeat contacts, users that trust us less to deal with their issue, declining satisfaction scores, or worse, just a lack of engagement with IT overall. So, how do we end up in this situation, or how do IT departments end up in this situation? I have a theory, and sometimes I think it's because of a fear of difficult conversations. The reason IT teams close tickets early isn't because they don't know better, it's because, well, let's face it, open tickets create pressure. Someone's going to ask about it, the user might chase, managers, execs might query what's going on if this situation's causing SLAs to breach. Close it, and the pressure disappears. Except the user's problem hasn't. My doctor could have done the same. He could have sent me on my way, hoped the tablets would have been enough, avoided the slightly awkward conversation about changing how I eat, maybe needing to lose a bit of weight, but he didn't, because his job isn't to manage his appointment list, it's to make me better. And that's really the crux of it. The difficult conversation isn't the problem, but avoiding it is. I think when you avoid the difficult conversation, you don't make the pressure go away. You just move it. The user still has the issue. The problem record still exists. The root cause is most definitely still there. You just made yourself temporarily invisible to it. And at some point, it comes back. It always comes back, and typically louder. So instead of asking how we close tickets faster, let's ask a better question. How can we, sticking with the analogy, make the user better? And I think there's a few things, and none of them complicated. They just require a bit of honesty. So, first up, I think it's okay at the point that an incident's logged to not have all the answers, and we should say so. My doctor didn't pretend to know exactly what was wrong on day one. He said, here's what we think, here's what we're doing, and here's what's going to happen next. That's it. That was the conversation. Our users don't expect IT to be magic, they expect to be kept informed. We don't know yet, but here's what we're doing to find out is a completely valid answer. What's not valid is closing a ticket and hoping they forget about it. Have the uncomfortable conversation early. It's always better than silence followed by repeat tickets, angry users, escalations. Secondly, I think a lot of IT departments out there need to stop treating incident SLA as the only metric that matters, or at least the pinnacle of metrics that matter. If your team is being measured purely on how fast they close incidents, you've accidentally built a system that simply rewards avoidance. Fast closure looks great on a dashboard. It doesn't mean anybody's better off. We need to give equal weight to how quickly did we find a workaround? How quickly did we identify root cause? Because let's be honest, one workaround can close 10, 20, 50, 100 incidents. So finding it faster has a multiplying effect that no individual SLA target can simply match. If we've got an open problem with no workaround, getting that workaround should ultimately be the priority. That is more important than hitting an arbitrary resolution time on any individual ticket. And teams should be incentivized accordingly. And when I say teams, I don't just mean the service desk. I mean those product teams, those service teams, resolving teams that own the service. They need to be incentivized to behave in this way too. Thirdly, and this is the big one, we should just stop closing incidents just because we've linked them to a problem. Let's be clear about what's happening when we do that. The ticket's gone. The queue looks clean. The SLA is met. IT feels great. But the user, again sticking with my analogy, is still throwing up. In that transaction, 100% of the benefit has gone to IT and 0 to the user. And that's the wrong way round. It's supposed to be the other way around. An incident should only be resolved when the user's issue has been remediated, either because the problem's been fixed or because there's a workaround in place that actually stops them being impacted, not because we've found something to link that ticket to. Linking a problem and then closing off is purely just a tracking mechanism. It's not a resolution, and therefore we shouldn't treat it like one. So, to wrap up, you'll hopefully be pleased to hear my doctor's still sorting me out. I'm taking my tablets, the vomiting stopped. I've probably talked about vomiting way too much in this video, so I apologise. And importantly, we've got a plan for what comes next. He's following up. Hopefully he's going to tell me when we're at the problem resolution stage. And that's it, really. That's the whole job. Treat the symptom, find the cause, fix it properly, keep the patient informed. It's not complicated, it's just easier to close the ticket, right? I hope that's been of use. I've been Gareth at Switch It Off and On again. See you again next time.